In the early hours of November 4, 1576, the city of Antwerp, one of the wealthiest and most vibrant centers of commerce in Europe, fell into chaos. Streets once crowded with merchants and traders filled instead with smoke, panic, and the sound of breaking doors. Armed soldiers moved through the city with little resistance. By nightfall, thousands were dead, entire districts were reduced to ash, and Antwerp's prosperity had been violently interrupted in a matter of hours. What unfolded that day would come to be known as the Sack of Antwerp, a moment that reshaped not only the city but the political future of the Low Countries. To understand how such destruction could occur so suddenly, it is necessary to step back into the broader tensions that had been building for decades. In the mid-16th century, the Low Countries, modern-day Belgium and the Netherlands, were under the rule of the Spanish Habsburg monarchy. Governed by Philip II of Spain, the region was economically vital but politically unstable. Its cities thrived on trade, finance, and a degree of local autonomy that clashed with the centralized authority Philip sought to impose. Religious conflict added another layer of strain. The spread of Protestantism, particularly Calvinism, challenged the Catholic orthodoxy enforced by Spanish rule. Efforts to suppress dissent through institutions such as the Inquisition only deepened resentment. Over time, what began as religious friction evolved into open resistance, culminating in the outbreak of the 80 Years' War in 1568. Antwerp stood at the center of this unfolding crisis. As one of Europe's leading ports, it connected markets across the continent and beyond. Its wealth attracted merchants from Italy, Germany, England, and the Iberian Peninsula. Yet that same prosperity made it vulnerable. The city became both a strategic prize and a symbol of what was at stake in the conflict. By the mid-1570s, the Spanish military presence in the Low Countries faced a serious problem: it was no longer being paid. Spain's global commitments, including wars in Italy and the Mediterranean, strained royal finances. Bankruptcy declarations in 1575 halted the flow of funds needed to sustain the army stationed in the region. Unpaid soldiers, many of them seasoned veterans, found themselves in an increasingly desperate situation. Discipline began to erode. Mutinies broke out across several garrisons. These were not isolated incidents but part of a broader pattern. Troops, lacking wages and supplies, turned to local populations for compensation, often through force. Antwerp, despite its wealth, was not immune to this growing instability. The city's defenses were substantial, but its political situation was complicated. Control of Antwerp was contested between loyalist forces and those aligned with the Dutch revolt. In late 1576, tensions escalated as Spanish troops stationed nearby began to organize. On November 4, these tensions reached a breaking point. Mutinous Spanish soldiers, joined by other units, advanced on Antwerp. The city's defenses were quickly overwhelmed. Attempts to resist were fragmented and poorly coordinated. Within hours, organized defense collapsed. What followed was not a structured military occupation but a breakdown of order. Soldiers spread through the city, targeting homes, warehouses, and public buildings. Fires broke out in multiple locations, fueled by wooden structures and tightly packed streets. The flames spread rapidly, consuming entire neighborhoods. Residents fled where they could, though escape was often difficult. Bridges and gates became choke points. Many sought refuge in churches or fortified buildings, but these too were not always safe. The scale of destruction unfolded with alarming speed. Contemporary accounts described widespread looting. Antwerp's wealth, its goods, currency, and stored commodities, became the focus of attention. Warehouses were emptied, valuables seized, and properties stripped. The economic infrastructure that had taken generations to build was dismantled in a single day. Estimates of casualties vary, but historians generally agree that thousands of civilians lost their lives during the sack. The violence, though severe, was not unique in the context of early modern warfare, where unpaid armies often turned against civilian populations. However, the scale and symbolic importance of Antwerp made this event particularly consequential. By the time order began to return, large portions of the city had been destroyed. Fires had reduced significant districts to ruins. Survivors faced not only the loss of property but the collapse of the economic networks that sustained their livelihoods. News of the sack spread quickly across Europe. The destruction of such a prominent commercial center shocked contemporaries. For many, it underscored the dangers of prolonged conflict and the consequences of failing to maintain control over military forces. Politically, the impact was immediate. The Sack of Antwerp became a turning point in the resistance against Spanish rule. Provinces that had previously been divided found common cause in opposing what they saw as the excesses of Spanish authority. Just days after the event, representatives from several provinces came together to form the Pacification of Ghent, an agreement aimed at uniting the Low Countries against foreign troops. This moment of unity, though temporary, marked a significant shift. The outrage generated by Antwerp's destruction helped bridge religious and political divides. Even regions that had remained loyal to Spain began to reconsider their position. For Spain, the consequences were equally significant. The sack damaged its reputation and weakened its hold over the region. Efforts were made to restore order and reassert control, but trust had been eroded. The perception of Spanish forces as a stabilizing presence was replaced by a sense of unpredictability and risk. Antwerp itself faced a long and uncertain recovery. While the city would continue to function as a commercial hub for some time, the damage inflicted in 1576 had lasting effects. Merchants began to relocate, seeking more stable environments. Over the following decades, Amsterdam would rise as a center of trade, gradually surpassing Antwerp in importance. The economic shift was not immediate, but the sack played a critical role in accelerating it. Confidence in Antwerp's security had been shaken. For a city whose prosperity depended on trust and reliability, this was a profound setback. Socially, the impact was equally deep. The loss of life, displacement of, and destruction of infrastructure disrupted communities across the city. Reconstruction efforts took years, and in some areas, the scars remained visible for generations. The sack also influenced how warfare was perceived in Europe. It served as a reminder of the consequences when military discipline breaks down. Governments and commanders increasingly recognized the need to maintain regular payment and supply systems for their troops, though such lessons were not always consistently applied. In historical memory, the Sack of Antwerp stands as a stark example of how quickly order can collapse under the pressure of unresolved conflict. It illustrates the interconnected nature of political authority, economic stability, and military discipline. When one element fails, the effects can cascade rapidly. The event also highlights the vulnerability of even the most prosperous. Antwerp's wealth, which had once been its greatest strength, became a liability when it attracted the attention of unpaid soldiers. Prosperity offered no protection in the absence of stability. Today, the Sack of Antwerp is remembered not only for its immediate devastation but for its broader implications. It marked a turning point in the 80 Years' War and contributed to the eventual of the Dutch Republic. It reshaped trade patterns in Europe and altered the balance of power in the region. The events of November 1576 unfolded over the course of a single day, yet their consequences extended far beyond that moment. They influenced political alliances, economic developments, and historical trajectories that would shape Europe for decades to come. In the end, the story of Antwerp is not only about destruction but about transformation. The city endured, adapted, and continued to play a role in European history. But the memory of that day remained a reminder of how fragile stability can be, and how quickly it can be lost when the forces meant to protect it fall out of control.